shutdown avoided. Congress passes a new budget deal, not without its share of opposition. From one child to two, is China's drastic policy change worth celebrating? Day of the Dead, the Catholic roots behind the Mexican tradition of El Dia de los Muertos. In our time, we break down the document that changed Catholic interfaith relations 50 years later. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, October 30th, 2015. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Catherine Seltner in for Brian Patrick with your news now. Congress avoids a government shutdown by passing a budget bill that raises the federal government's limit on borrowing. A few presidential hopefuls opposed the bill, which passed in the Senate early this morning. The bill now goes to the White House, where Mark Irons reports. Mark?
Catherine, today President Obama said he's eager to sign the budget bill when it reaches his desk. Senators Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio left the campaign trail to vote against the budget. Speeches by Paul and Cruz helped delay the Senate vote on the bill, but it ultimately passed with bipartisan support.
On this vote, the yeas are 64, the nays are 35. 3/5 of the Senate duly chosen and sworn having voted in the affirmative. The motion is agreed to.
It wasn't until after 3 a.m. that the Senate passed the budget deal after opposition from fiscal conservatives in the Senate pushed the chamber into a rare overnight session.
The number one threat to our country's future is our debt.
Senators Rand Paul and Ted Cruz spoke for hours in a failed attempt to filibuster the bill that 79 Republicans and 187 Democrats in the House passed on Wednesday. The deal raises the government's debt ceiling through March 2017. It also comes with an increase in federal spending of more than $80 billion on military and domestic programs. Paul called the bill the result of an unholy alliance.
On the right, they say, well, we need more money for military. On the left, they say we need more money for welfare. And so they get together, there's a secret handshake, and we spend more money on everything.
10 years from now, we are told $33 billion will be cut in 2025. Well, Mr. President, if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn, and I have some beachfront property in Arizona for you.
Cruz says nobody in Congress believes those cuts will ever happen.
In a White House statement, the president said the deal shows Congress can help, not hinder the nation's progress. Now Congress faces a December deadline to pass legislation giving further specifics about how the budget money should be spent. Catherine?
Thank you, Mark Irons. Now for other stories, our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The White House says a small number of U.S. Special Operations Forces being deployed to Syria will have an impact on the fight against ISIS. They'll be offering support to local ground forces. It's the first time American troops will be working openly in the war-torn country. Meanwhile, a missile attack kills at least 40 people in that nation. Opposition activists say this is the latest government attack on the rebel-held area near Damascus. Rebels claim 11 missiles slammed the area, some hitting a market. The attack comes as international leaders meet in Austria in hopes of ending the war in Syria. Greece is lashing out against Europe for how it's handling the migration crisis after 23 people drowned in 2 shipwrecks today. Migrants continue to arrive in the country. Tens of thousands of life vests discarded by migrants can be seen on every single beach on one island. Volunteers try to clean them up on a daily basis. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio endorses Hillary Clinton for president. He calls her the best candidate to address income inequality. De Blasio faced criticism for not backing Clinton earlier in her campaign. Today's endorsement comes as Clinton launches a new Southern campaign swing. It outlines criminal justice proposals she says would treat Black Americans more fairly. Chris Farrell is the Director of Investigations and Research at Judicial Watch. Chris, it seems Clinton is moving forward in her campaign despite the Benghazi investigation and the email scandal.
One thing Mrs. Clinton does face, though, is a very serious national security crimes investigation tied directly to the emails and, of course, Benghazi. And in that investigation, really the question is the same question that General Petraeus faced, and that is the mishandling or the gross negligence in the handling of national defense information. That inquiry is being conducted forensically by the FBI, and of course the Justice Department will arrive at a legal conclusion as to whether there should be a referral to a grand jury. big questions await Mrs. Clinton.
And it's the end of the month. That means the State Department will release more emails. Has any damage come from these email dumps?
Yeah, I mean, Mrs. Clinton has been proved to be a liar. She told her family that they knew it was a terrorist attack on the night of the Benghazi raid, on that night of the attack that killed the ambassador and 3 other officers. And then she turned around and told the public something completely different. She told the Egyptian prime minister the next day that they knew it was a terrorist attack, that there was no involvement of any video. And yet she stood by week after week after week while the administration kept offering this phony video story. So, I mean, it's documented. She lied, and we've seen it with documentary proof out of her own email.
It'll be something we'll be continuing to watch. On a very different note, your group has a lawsuit pegged to those Planned Parenthood videos. Tell us why. What is that about?
Right. Well, we sued the Department of Health and Human Services over the involvement of one of those doctors in those videos and her involvement in contracts and projects and programs at Health and Human Services. We think the American public needs to know how much money she's been paid, what kind of projects she's been working on, because our tax dollars have gone toward it.
Chris Farrell with Judicial Watch, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Speaker Paul Ryan is promising changes in the House of Representatives. News Nightly's Jason Calvi looks at what some of those changes might be.
Speaker Paul Ryan stands at the helm of a House he calls broken.
We're not solving problems. We're adding to them.
Some conservatives complained former Speaker John Boehner was too powerful.
You know who you are.
Pushing bills to the floor without input from rank-and-file members.
If you know the issue, you should write the bill.
Ryan says the House committees should do that work.
We need to let every member contribute, not once they've earned their stripes, but now.
Ryan promised change in his first speech as House Speaker, after years of division in his party.
He knows that he wants to lead and he can lead, but he wants to lead a team.
Nebraska Republican Jeff Fortenberry is helping review and renew House rules.
If a member has 125 co-sponsors on a piece of legislation, they ought to get a hearing on that. That means that there are a number of people here who've put their name by a concept and an idea. That shouldn't be suppressed by a committee chairman or the rules or the speaker or anyone else. Members should be empowered to bring their ideas forward for the benefit of the country.
With Speaker Ryan's promise of turning the page,
we are wiping the slate clean.
Only time will tell if he can truly write a new chapter in the history of the House. Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
I am now ready to take the oath of office.
Thank you, Jason. The Archdiocese of St. Louis warns the public about the dangers of a so-called exorcism being shown live on television today. Archbishop Robert Carlson has not granted the necessary permissions to any priests or bishops for the televised event. The Archdiocese says anyone involved who claims to be a member of the Catholic clergy is not affiliated with the Archdiocese of St. Louis or the Vatican. It says the event trivializes the ancient rite of the Roman Catholic Church and the very real danger of evil. Coming up, Skulls and Souls. Catholics celebrate El Dia de los Muertos across Mexico and the U.S. One-child policy no more. China changes its laws, but how much damage is already done? Sunday, we celebrate All Saints' Day, which makes tomorrow Halloween. This is because it falls on the eve of All Saints, or All Hallows Eve. Sunday's feast honors all the saints in heaven. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Catherine Seltner. Mexicans prepare for El Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead. Papier-mâché skeletons, sugar skulls, and traditional crafts line the altar at this Mexican museum. The Day of the Dead is celebrated across Mexico in the beginning of November. It combines Roman Catholic traditions of All Souls Day with pre-Hispanic customs, like offering food to souls who are set to return for the day. Ernesto Vega is the coordinator of Spanish Adult Faith Formation in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. He is obviously partaking in celebrations himself today. Ernesto, can you clarify, how did this tradition begin?
Yes, actually this tradition is an indigenous tradition. It has its roots in the ancient civilization of these lands and the people that lived here, that understood that the creator of life, the creator that gave the life to the mountains, to the animals, to people, is also the creator that gives life to the persons who've departed to the afterlife. He is the giver of life and grace and beauty and truth. And so the indigenous people had special celebrations where they would bring food, flowers, candles, in order to remind themselves that we have life after death. And so they had this special name to name spirits. They would call the ones who don't have flesh, the ones who are spiritual. So from there, in their codexes, they would put skulls and also bones as a way of representing the spirit world. And so therefore, eventually it got mixed with the Catholic tradition, and it would not contradict our Catholic teaching. Why? Because the church understands that Christ is the giver of all life.
So what is the Archdiocese of Los Angeles doing to celebrate the Day of the Dead?
We have two celebrations, one for students and one for the public. And we bring food, we bring prayer, we bring the Holy Mass, we do altars. In the altars we put pictures of the departed, the beloved people that in our families or our culture have gone away. Like, for example, John Paul II. You know, we have the celebration of all souls. And then we bring candles, food, and we place it on the altar, especially bread. But also we have music and food for the people. And that celebration, that festivity, is a celebration of life. It's a celebration and a reminder that Christ invites us to the power of his resurrection.
And what a beautiful reminder that is. Ernesto Vega, thank you for joining us. That was so helpful. Have a great weekend.
You're very welcome. Blessings.
Iraq's ambassador to the U.S. is making a plea for more help from the international community to alleviate the humanitarian crisis in his country. Wyatt Goolsbee has more. Wyatt?
Catherine, Ambassador Luqman Faili told me the crisis in Iraq is not only a regional challenge, but a global one. He is grateful for American aid, but he says solving the problem will require lots of support.
Another week, another round of airstrikes in Iraq against the terrorist group ISIS. And Kurdish commandos backed by U.S. Special Forces fight ISIS on the ground. For tens of thousands of Iraqis, the damage is done. They're forced to flee their homes, in many cases living in refugee camps and praying for peace. It's these children Ambassador Luqman Faili hopes the world will remember. Faili says the Iraqi government is doing its best, but fighting back against the terrorist group is nearly impossible on their own.
If we allow ISIS, which means that we are allowing them to recruit and indoctrinate young ones from different countries, we don't want these people to come over to Iraq or Syria and go back to their countries and create havoc.
Faili says ISIS targets ethnic and religious minorities, including Christians, many of whom have fled their homeland. Pope Francis called for prayers this week. The Holy Father assured Iraqi Chaldean bishops meeting in Rome they have the Vatican's full support. Archbishop Bashar Warda of Erbil, Iraq, is grateful. He says there is little he can do to stop the exodus of Christians from his country. His duty now is to take care of those who are left behind.
My plan is how to help the Christian families who decided to stay and live with dignity. That's my big concern.
It's a concern for all of the Catholic bishops and priests in Iraq. The ambassador compares the violence to living the tragedy of 9/11 all the time. That's how he described life to me in Iraq right now. Catherine?
Thank you, Wyatt. Families react to news China will allow all married couples to have 2 children. Thursday's announcement signals the end of 35 years of China's drastic one-child policy. It's blamed for altering gender balance and forcing women to have abortions. China first introduced the one-child policy in 1979 to curb surging population growth. Olivia Enos is a research associate in the Asian Studies Center at the Heritage Foundation. So, Olivia, are you celebrating this policy change?
Well, Catherine, while this policy change is certainly welcome, it doesn't represent a fundamental change in policy. While it is going from 1 child to 2 children, it's really still sending the message to Chinese families that the Chinese government is going to continue to be involved in what should be a personal family decision.
So 35 years later, what damage has been done to China's population?
So unfortunately, it's caused both severe economic and demographic challenges as well as humanitarian challenges. And those economic and demographic challenges are irreversible. In fact, some economists estimate that China's GDP growth will go from 7.2% in 2013 to even lower, 6%, some estimate, as a result of these demographic challenges. But beyond that, there have been severe human rights challenges, as you mentioned, forced abortion, forced sterilization. It's even led to human trafficking, and we've also seen that there's been a severe gender ratio imbalance. Now 115 boys for every 100 girls in China today.
So can this new policy update, can that undo any of the damage that's done to China's demographic?
You know, unfortunately, it looks like the demographic history and future of China has already been written. But China does have an opportunity and could go even farther by completely removing the government's role in making these personal family decisions and giving individual Chinese people the ability to make decisions about family size for themselves.
We will watch to see what that nation decides to do. Olivia Anos, thank you for joining us from the Heritage Foundation.
Thank you.
Up next, we sit down with a scientist on the edge of technology who's fighting to promote life in her field. And 50 years later, what fruit have we seen from a major interreligious document out of the Vatican?
Let us ask the help of St. Michael the Archangel to defend us from the snares of the devil. A tweet from Pope Francis this week. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Catherine Seltner. A pro-life scientist based in Washington State is on a mission to eliminate human exploitation and medical research. Earlier this week, our Brian Patrick sat down with her to discuss alternatives to embryonic stem cells.
Joining us, Dr. Teresa Deischer, founder of AVM Biotechnology. That's a company dedicated to finding effective and ethical stem cell technologies. Dr. Deischer, you go way back with stem cell research. Just give us a brief background.
I have been working in the field of regenerative medicine since I was a graduate student. And in one of my first jobs, I worked on blood stem cell formation and then became involved in stem cells for organs outside of the blood system in about 1995, 1996.
And you started working with embryonic stem cells, and tell us how that brought about a major change in your life.
I actually wasn't doing embryonic stem cell research myself. There was embryonic stem cell research going on in the company that I was working for. And at that time, I was very pro-choice, very much a feminist, and really had no moral interest or religious interest in the area at all. However, scientifically, embryonic stem cells are problematic because they form tumors and they cause immune rejection and they're very expensive. And right at that time, I discovered adult pluripotent stem cells. And if you can get that kind of a stem cell from an adult, which we did, then embryonic stem cells are not necessary at all. And clinically, the best choice is the adult stem cell. It's just a no-brainer.
So the pro-life movement, you say, needs to really offer some good scientific proof and good positive alternatives when arguing against embryonic stem cell research.
Well, absolutely. It's not enough just to say no. One wants to explain why, and scientifically, there's sound reasons why we wouldn't use aborted fetal material or embryonic stem cells. And then because we care about people with illnesses, and we care about people watching a loved one suffer, we want to make sure that they get the very best stem cell they possibly could. And those are adult stem cells that are effective and safe. And they also happen not to harm anyone else.
So define an adult stem cell.
An adult stem cell is a stem cell that would come after birth. So even cells taken from the umbilical cord are considered adult, although sometimes they'll be called fetal, but they're taken after the child is born, and there's no harm that has come to them. And other adult stem cells exist in all of our bodies.
Yes. So that is where the resistance comes from, is toward taking the life of an embryo, a child, but with adult stem cells that is not necessary, and the technology is so much better in that area. It's fascinating to me. We'll talk with you more about it next time you're in town. We appreciate you being with us, Dr. Teresa Deisher.
I look forward to coming back. Thank you.
Thanks.
That was Brian earlier this week. Pope Francis calls for greater interfaith collaboration in the face of religious extremism. His plea came on the 50th anniversary of a document that transformed the church's relations with the Jewish community, as one Jewish scholar pointed out earlier this week in the Vatican.
Nostra Aetate is a document that emerged out of the concern of St. John the 23rd to transform the relationship with the Jewish people. That was its primary motivation, to address the relationship of the church to the Jewish people.
In Our Time is one of the most important documents to emerge from the Second Vatican Council. Father Dominic Legg is a theology professor at the Dominican House of Studies. Father, can you break down the key points of Nostra Aetate?
Well, I would say, first, it's the Vatican II document that addresses the relation of the church to non-Christian religions. So it first addresses Judaism, but it also addresses all other religions. And one of the things that comes through very clearly at the beginning is the importance of religious questions for human beings and, in fact, for human society. That's something that's called into question by the secular agenda today, but the Vatican Council put it at the center of really what it means to be human. The second thing is that it encourages a new appreciation of Christianity for Judaism, and that, as we just heard, is one of the major fruits that have come from it. Seeing the Jewish people as having a genuine vocation, as the chosen people, chosen by God, entrusted with a revelation, and a calling that is irrevocable. And the last element would be its encouragement of interreligious dialogue in general.
Won't some interpret an increase in interreligious dialogue as a watering down on church teaching of truth? How do you respond to that?
That's a very good question, because in a way there's a good way and a bad way to go about interreligious dialogue. One way that you might think of it is to say, oh, well, all religions are just different paths to the same destination. But in fact, that is not the way the Second Vatican Council treated it in this document, and the way that the Church has treated it in the years since, but rather to say, we appreciate the truth that is found in wherever it is. And in fact, we can have a real esteem for other religions, while at the same time proclaiming that the fullness of that truth is found in Christ. So those religions may reflect a ray, the Council said, of the truth which is Jesus Christ.
So 50 years later, what fruits have we seen from this document?
Well, I think interreligious dialogue, and especially relations with Judaism, have been a very important fruit. That's been a wonderful source of reconciliation. But also, I would say, a new appreciation even for Catholics about how to approach evangelization. You find the good wherever it is in the world, and then you try to show how it leads you to Christ.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Father Dominic Legg from the Dominican House of Studies. Always helpful to have your insight.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. That's all for tonight. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Catherine Seltner. Have a blessed weekend. We'll see you here on Monday. We leave you tonight with sounds from the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra, celebrating a festival to honor St. John Paul II.